Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pokemon Review series. In this episode, we're going over one of the newer-ish Pokemon in the game as the time of recording this, and that is Vikavolt. Now, Vikavolt was released with the Old Gold Power Plant. That means it's, as of right now, the latest game Pokemon, or one of the three latest game Pokemon in the game. So, it obviously is likely to be very powerful given how late its edition was and how late it is available. And that definitely holds true. Now let's get into exactly why that is the case. So first off, it's got the bug type. This would be kind of bad for a berry specialist if it was that, but it is not. It is an ingredient specialist. It's got the dozing sleep type, ingredient specialty, and it's got one of the weakest main skills in Charge Strength S. But it is an ingredient specialist, so we don't really care too much about its main skill. But its skill trigger rate is shockingly high for a non-skill specialist, notably. Now, it's got pretty much average speed. 46 minutes and 40 seconds is pretty much what we think of as the average speed tier in this game. And a 19.4% ingredient rate. Now, average speed with a slightly lower ingredient rate usually is kind of rough. That means that they're not going to be producing that many ingredients. Normally, this sort of ingredient mix would be kind of bad on an ingredient specialist for this low of a rate with this middling of a speed. There are Pokemon that have worse ingredient rates and slower speeds that are still decent. Like the primary one that I can think of that is like that is Quagsire. If I'm to pull up Quagsire here, you can see that it's got 19% ingredient rate and a 56-minute time frame, so that's a little bit different. But Quagsire makes up for it in high value procs, and Vikavolt's very similar. Its ingredient list procs are rather high value, being 2, 5, and 7 coffee. Now, that actually isn't that high of value when you think about the numbers of how valuable those procs are, especially in comparison to those Quagsire procs, which are the same size but of a much stronger ingredient, that being mushrooms. Especially since this guy also has mushrooms as well in B and C slots. But coffee is a vital ingredient in the current meta of the game. Zingzap Spice Cola being the second strongest dessert. Clodsire Eclairs now being the strongest dessert. And the strongest of other meals being the... where are they? Oh, that's the Defiant Coffee Just Salad and the Hidden Power Perk Up Stew. Hidden Power Perk Up Stew. There we go. I said it right. Those three meals being the strongest in the game. Zingzap being close behind in second for desserts. Coffee is a very, very significant ingredient, and as you can see here, a Vikavolt is, by quite a long shot, the best producer of coffee, even when taking into account ABB options like the Aggron. And when we consider inventory, I think the gap closes a little bit. Vikavolt doesn't have that many inventory issues, given that it has a 3-stage evolution and a 19-size inventory. That's a very big inventory for a ingredient, or for a 3-stage Pokemon. It's not the biggest, but it's pretty big. So it doesn't run into too many inventory issues. Oops. So Vikavolt really is the best coffee producer, and coffee is one of the most important ingredients in the game. A lot of players really want the mono coffee Vikavolt because you just need coffee if you want to be making the best dishes in the game. So this guy is essential to very heavily cooking focus teams, because without him, you literally can't make the top 4 meals in the entire game. Unless you do it with an Aggron, but it's going to be much more difficult with an Aggron. Shinx hardly produces, or Luxray hardly produces even close, being a C ingredient only. So, Aggron's like the only alternative option right now. That could change soon with Clodsire. More on that when Clodsire comes out. But that's what we're working with. Now, something very interesting that I do want to bring up. The mono list is obviously the most desired one right now, given that it is the only Pokemon that does it this well. But something very interesting, if I'm to make the comparison for mushrooms, if you catch a good coffee Aggron, and you don't have a good Gengar or Quagsire, or there's a lot of options for mushrooms already, actually. Quagsire and Gengar being the two primary, but Vikavolt actually does mushrooms pretty well. As you can see here, it actually outperforms Quagsire, which is the mono option, in this quick evaluation. Now, if you consider inventory, Quagsire does come out on top because Quagsire does run into inventory issues where Vikavolt does not, but as you can see, the difference is pretty minuscule. So whether you have the 2,000 hours slept or the 0 hours slept, either way, if that inventory is not a problem, it's still pretty much the same. So a mono mushroom Vikavolt can also do pretty well, and it's got a little more synergy than just running mono mushroom Quagsire, and more easy to find because B options are more common than A options in the second slot. And if we look at the meals, Hidden Power Perk Up Stew takes just a little bit of coffee and quite a bit of mushrooms, so you get a little synergy there as well, more meal coverage that the Vikavolt can offer you. So there are benefits to going with an ABB Vikavolt over, say, a Quagsire or a Gengar. And something that I also want to discuss, very recent news, the Clodsire Eclair was recently announced. It's got coffee and honey. Now, an AAC Vikavolt, if it's got this list, can theoretically do pretty well at making this. It can cover the honey on its own, barring no RNG issues. But it's not going to produce quite enough for the coffee if it has the AAC list. So you would need to supplement, and supplementing coffee right now is pretty difficult, given that the only non-ingredient specialists that produce it are like your Mimikyu, your Braviary, and that's only at level 60. So it's going to be pretty difficult to supplement, but you can stockpile, which is pretty, like, stockpile backup ingredients for covering that extra coffee where the AAC Vikavolt could not make it. I think most players at this point have invested into mono options and have said mono or bust kind of on it, because it is just, there aren't that many other options. But if more coffee options become viable, coffee options become available, then I think an AAC Vikavolt could be a very interesting potential, as well as AAB once again for that Hidden Power Perk Up Stew. I'd probably prefer ABB for that though, or ABA. I wouldn't like the ABC because there isn't really any synergy between mushrooms and honey, so this would be kind of rough to be dealing with. But I think all the other lists have some level of viability. I used to say ignore the C ingredient altogether on Vikavolt, because the only meal that took that synergy was the Early Bird Coffee Jelly, which isn't a very powerful meal. You're not going to be wanting to be making that consistently because you'd want something else. But now that this Clodsire Eclair is out, that was a huge buff to the AAC Vikavolt. And if you want to hunt it, Old Gold Power Plant, the only place to go. Unfortunately, it is an Old Gold Power Plant exclusive late game Pokemon. Very powerful though once you do get it. And yeah, you're looking for that coffee. That coffee is very, very powerful. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the video and learned something a little bit, then I ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It does help out the channel quite a bit. And yeah, I thank you guys for watching and hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.